saw a constitutional crisis, if not an outright civil war. This election wasn't the 1860 election that led to civil war after Lincoln's victory. It wasn't 1876 when a bunch of states sent rival electors to Washington and the whole thing ended up being stitched up in a rather seamy deal. In fact, for me, the most surprising thing is that you had highest turnout since 1900, both sides successfully mobilizing voters, but the country collectively voted for the center ground. Joe Biden, the personification of the political middle, emerged just victorious, but a very narrow victory. In fact, by the standards of the Democratic Party, the narrowest and weakest showing since 1884, because every president since Grover Cleveland on the Democratic side has come into office with both houses of Congress in Democratic hands, and that seems likely not to be the case, unless, of course, the Democrats can pull off a surprise success in the Georgia runoffs. If you look at the way people voted, there clearly were Republicans who voted for down-ballot Republican candidates, but not for Donald Trump. He underperformed candidates for the Senate and House in a bunch of places. So I think the country actually collectively voted for the middle ground and repudiated Trump's more extreme positions. Ultimately, people had enough of him, at least enough Republicans for him to lose. And they also repudiated the more radical agenda of the progressive or socialist left of the Democratic Party. So I'm really left in quite a cheerful mood in the wake of this result, certainly relative to those people who predicted Weimar America and the downfall of the Republic.
Figure in the Republican Party, even after having lost an election, which seems to me very unusual. So in that context, why is it, in your view, if not for this rather extreme existential polarization, why are Republicans not, acknowledging the results of the election? From Mitch McConnell down to, as I say, rank and file Republicans who overwhelmingly now think this was a stolen election.
Well, let's remember, Fareed, that many Democrats felt that way, not only about the 2016 election, but about the 2000 election. So it's not like it's the first time that the losers have said the election was stolen. The Democrats spent 4 years trying to find evidence that Vladimir Putin was responsible for Donald Trump's election and failed to find it. So I think we shouldn't over-exaggerate. We shouldn't exaggerate what we are seeing here. I think it's important to recognize that Trump was an extraordinarily charismatic political leader who was able to hijack the Republican Party in 2016. But he also was able to do it because he had articulated policies that were popular: the anti-immigration policy, the anti-free trade policy, anti-liberal elites. He was able to channel a great deal of frustration in Middle America. And it's not like that frustration has entirely gone away. I think you're also right that the Democrats made the mistake of becoming the lockdown party, which allowed Trump to campaign as the make the economy great again candidate. But in the end, he lost. I don't think Trumpism is going to go away. I mean, I think the next generation of Republican leaders are going to have to meet the expectations of that extraordinarily mobilized base that Trump has created. But I think, in the end, and I'll go back here to something that Doris Kearns-Goodwin said, I think we can understand all of this in the context of American history without having to look at Central Europe in the 1920s and 1930s. Trump is a populist. In many ways, he echoes the populism of the late 19th century. And if Trump refuses to go away politically, which I suspect he will, it'll be a bit like William Jennings Bryan, who was the populist who refused to go away as far as the Democratic Party was concerned and was an unsuccessful candidate for the presidency 3 times. Trump will doubtless seek to say the election was stolen, he should have another crack in 2024. But my guess is that the Republican Party's leadership, not only at the national level, but at the state level, is quietly planning to make sure that that doesn't happen. Publicly, they cannot denounce him. They can't disown him, because if they do that, he's going to turn on them, just as he's already turned on Fox News. And that would be very damaging for the Republican Party. A divided party never does well. So I think what we're seeing at the moment is the Republican Party establishment humoring Donald Trump all the way out the White House. And I think they will then make sure that whatever happens, he is not the nominee in 2024.
want to ask you about your sort of optimism, which is, do you think the world will look at this election and America right now and say, fundamentally, this was an impressive demonstration that the American system worked, the rule of law prevailed, or will it say, boy, the United States is in a very strange place politically, chaotic, coming apart at the seams? What do you think?
Well, it depends where you are. By the way, thanks for the fact check, Fareed, but I never said the same proportion of Democrats questioned the legitimacy of the 2016 election. Hillary Clinton did say it had been stolen, and I think that was a significant intervention. Look, Europeans will say, hooray, the United States is going back to normal and we can go back to transatlantic normality. But I don't think that's the way it's going to look in the Middle East, where many people, particularly in the Arab world, will worry that the Obama policies with respect to Iran are going to be resuscitated. I think the key thing to remember here, and it's important in the light of what my colleagues have been saying, is that Biden is not coming into office, as Lyndon Johnson did or Franklin Roosevelt did, with a massive dominant majority in Congress. Remember, the Democrats had 68 Senate seats after the 1964 election. The most that Biden can hope for is to scrape a tiny margin out of two runoffs in Georgia and have Kamala Harris cast the deciding vote. So I think what people are going to have to get used to in the rest of the world is that Joe Biden is not going to be a very powerful president. Indeed, the big danger for him, I think, is he ends up being as weak as Jimmy Carter ended up being. Why was that? Because Carter simultaneously had to fight a Cold War, and I believe we are in a Cold War now with China, even if there's a chance of détente, and at the same time to satisfy the left of his own party, which constantly sniped at him. So I think the world is going to have to get used to a very different kind of presidency from Donald Trump's, but also a very different one from LBJ's or FDR's, whose names have been invoked today.
And we will have to leave it at that.